Can they stop him? They can't. David Nugent makes his mark. Zamora! He's done it this time.
Oh, as it goes through, Cresswell, it's in, it's got it!
Excellent save from Nugent, goal!
Into the area, it's gone, David Nugent, it's come off, and Billy Davies, he's the man!
Hello, you're listening to the North End pod. Today we've got a very special guest, a man who took us to a championship playoff final, championship playoff semi-final, probably the most successful manager at the club in the last 20 years. Today I am joined by the one, Billy Davies. Billy, how are you doing?
Daniel, it's a pleasure to be on your show. It's a pleasure to be chatting to you and the rest of the Preston supporters. And I'm obviously delighted to be here.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming. Before we get into North End, what have you been doing? You've been going to a lot of games, haven't you, recently, and getting yourself about and stuff?
Yeah, very much so. There's been a whole range of, if you like, perfect storm events that's took place. Daniel, a long time ago when I left Forest, I was involved in a very long kind of long dispute with the previous owner. In addition to that, there was I feel there was terrible advice given by people that should have known better, and that advice was from people mainly, I would think, off the field of playing the non-football side. And then, of course, in no particular order, we had a terrible pandemic, I had terrible family health issues. And then I decided to build qualifications. I went to Liverpool University for over a year to do a diploma in football management. I've been travelling the world, going to club visits. I've been doing games all over the country. I've been doing continued personal development for a number of years. And I'm now ready to go, Daniel. Ready to go.
You're ready to get back into football.
Ready to go,
Great to hear. Right, let's go back a long way, back to 2002. You get the call from Craig Brown to come in as first team coach. I was surprised to hear that you've not actually worked with Craig Brown before.
No, it was very strange, really. I mean, obviously, I'd met him down at what they call the coaching courses at Inverclyde down at Largs, where Craig done all these bits. And I'd met Craig once or twice, but I didn't really know this guy. And then, of course, I went to Motherwell Football Club. And then when I left Motherwell Football Club, I got this call from the former Scotland manager, who I didn't really know that well. And he asked me to come down to Preston as first team coach. And I've got to say, Daniel, when you get that type of call with that type of experienced manager, you sit back and you think, wow, this is a great opportunity. And that's why I decided to go down and join Craig.
Yeah, great. What did you learn from Craig in that? It must have been great to learn from, obviously, such an experience. You managed at World Cups for Scotland. Great learning tree for you.
World Cups, European Championships. I think it was something like 70 international matches that he led his country. And I felt it was a great opportunity, obviously, on and off the pitch, because this guy's vastly experienced. He knew how to handle people. He knew how to handle situations. He was a very good man manager. And I've got to say that just things that he done, Daniel, just the way that he worked, events that would take place in a club, the way that he handled board members and press and all these other things. It was just a pleasure to watch him working, and a pleasure to talk to him on a very regular basis, and a pleasure to go and get that advice. And very, very sad that we've now lost Craig, unfortunately.
Yeah, tragic, wasn't it? He brought some great players to the club. Ricardo Fuller was, well, how good was Ricardo Fuller? Because you would have worked with him for those 2 years. Yeah,
Ricardo was a great talent, wasn't he? He was.
Yeah.
He was an enigma type. He just done things off the cuff, and he had great ability, excellent pace. He loved to run at people, scored some wonderful goals, and he was a fantastic signing.
Yeah, one of the goals that we played Leicester, and he just took on the entire. Leicester had just come down from the Prem. He took on the entire team, and I was watching it thinking, this guy, because he played at Hearts, hadn't he? The previous season before he came to North End, and he took the Scottish League by storm that year.
The other thing as well, Daniel's very interesting, is that when you look at Ricardo was the type of player that what he done on the field of play, believe it or not, it was the exact same in the training ground. He was such an entertainer, he was such a He was a guy with a bag of tricks, as we know, and he had that such swagger and confidence about him. Him and Big Claude Davies, both of these guys, where they came from. Big Claude was the same. They had a wonderful, easy Aussie stride about them and how they went about life and their culture. And it was just great to work with these guys and learn from them and what their culture was all about.
Yeah, what was Claude? I was going to ask you later on, what was he like to work with, Claude? Because he seemed like a right character.
Well, he was a character. He was a big, a really strong personality, full of confidence, a real swagger again about Claude, and, a real good guy in the dressing room, a really good type. And you could talk straight to both of them. And we certainly had many conversations about the rights and the wrongs of what to do. As you know, Daniel, I was always right, they were always wrong, and we eventually sorted it out. But no, Claude was a magnificent player to have at the club, along with Ricardo, and we certainly did have many, many good players.
Yeah, I can imagine. So let's go to the 2004-2005 season. We'd lost Fuller that summer. We didn't start off the season too well. I remember we lost on the opening day. I think Sheffield United. We beat Watford, and then lost to Sheffield United, drew at Wolves, and then we played Brighton away. That we were talking before about. That was the first time that I met you, and it was at the old Withdean Stadium, and we lost 1-0. And Craig unfortunately lost his job after that. And your intentions were to go with him at the time, weren't they?
Well, I remember getting a call from Craig on I think it was the Sunday. We played Brighton away on the Saturday. Craig called me on the Sunday to tell me that the club were making a change. I certainly made it clear to Craig. I felt that coming in with Craig, I should have went out with Craig. Craig then went and spoke to the chairman, Derek Shaw, about me joining him to leave. Derek Shaw was very reluctant, I'm told by Craig, to let me go. I believe at that time, Daniel, there was a lot of player power for me that wanted me to hang around and stay. I then got my own management team to speak to the board of Preston. I was desperate to leave, and eventually Craig and I sat down, and Craig said to me, you know what? He said, you're a young man with a young family. He said, I've got a pension that could choke a horse, so don't worry about me. He said, but you're a young guy, you can't walk away. You've got to sit tight, see what happens with the club, and then just continue to do your job well. And that's eventually what happened, Daniel. With Craig's blessing, I sat tight for the caretaker manager. I think it was 5 or 6 games or so. I had a great rapport with the players. I had a wonderful relationship with the people at the club. I was very sad to see Craig go, no doubt about it. But when you get that man's, if you like, thumbs up, and you get him saying what he said, then I was then just a matter of sitting tight and trying to do your job professionally.
Yeah, you've got to go for it, haven't you? I remember the caretaker spell. You won 3 home games without conceding. And it was one of those, after each game, I was thinking, are they going to appoint him now? Are they going to appoint him now? I think it took about a month in the end. What was that process like? Was it something that was always, you thought yourself was going to happen, or?
No, I don't think any caretaker manager believes that is the case, Daniel. I think when you go in as a caretaker manager, all you're trying to do is steady the ship, keep doing the great work that was done by Craig and all the people at the club previously. All you can do as a caretaker is try and do the job, try and win matches for the fans and the club and all the people involved. Continue to be professional. And at that point, you're not thinking anything, Daniel, except at the next game, winning the match, and keep trying to do as professional a job as you could.
So when you find out you've got the job, is that when you start implementing your own style, your own training? And I think Craig was saying in an interview himself, his advice to you was get rid of the 3-5-2 and go to 4-4-2. And that was something that obviously happened. So yeah, intensity is a word that I hear a lot from the players at that time. Was that something straight away you thought, right, intensity in training?
Well, what you do as an assistant manager, because I then went from first team to assistant, what you try and do is you obviously advise the manager and you give your opinion. And I was always saying to Craig about training, about warm-ups, about formations. I'm not, to be honest, I'm not that keen on a back three. Craig knew I wasn't keen on a back three. I respect him as a manager. He's been very successful with the formations that he likes to play. But I'm more keen on other formations, Daniel. That's not a criticism. And what you do is you go into the club and you start to implement what you believe in the training ground is the right thing to do. You try to take a lot of the learning process from the manager, Craig, and the previous things that he did. And then you try to put your own stamp on training, on tactics, on preparation, and on man management. You try to then speak to guys and find out how they feel and speak to the staff. And all of a sudden, you just start to change one or two things, Daniel.
Yeah, I think Chris Sedgwick, you signed Chris Sedgwick, one of your first signings, and he said, he was like, I came in, I've never seen anything like it. He was like, I was knackered after that first month, but that was as fit as I ever was after that first month. And that was obviously a key part of that team, the fitness. He said the hardest part was actually the training, and it was easy on the match days. That was the easy part.
Well, that's what we try and do. Is it's we try and make sure that on the training ground we're doing all the right things, and it was important to me to have that identity for Preston North End, the identity of being this high energy team, a team with a wonderful attitude, a team that went out every Saturday and gave its all for the supporters and the owners and the board, a team that was as best prepared as we could. We knew that in the championship, there's games you win, games you lose. Sometimes you don't deserve to lose. Sometimes you don't deserve to win. So we knew that it's a long, hard season. But the most important thing, Daniel, was getting that intensity into the training, getting that demand into the training, making sure that the players knew what their roles were within the team, making sure they knew what the expectation was in relation to putting that jersey, that Preston North End jersey. It means a lot to everybody, a lot of fans, a lot of history, a lot of culture. And when you pull that jersey on, then there's got to be a passion that is second to none, a commitment that is second to none, and a will to win that runs right through the spine of this club. And that's what we try to do.
Yeah, definitely. One of the players that I want to speak about first that he definitely had a big effect on was Richard Cresswell. The season before, he worked his socks off, Cresswell, for us. And the season before, he got 2 goals. And the fans were getting on his back, but he was doing all the running. A lot of Ricardo's running that season, I thought. And that season that you took over, he got 21 goals. What did you change in Richard's game to get that out of him? Because he loved working with you. Richard Cresswell spoke about that.
Well, listen, you need to put your arm around certain players. And Crazy was hurting because he was taking a bit of stick and he was getting people were getting on his back and what have you. So I think the first thing you do is you get an arm around that player because you know that player has got great ability. You know his attitude is first class, and you make a fantastic point there. He was a team player, and a lot of running that he done was for the benefit of other people. So he certainly was not getting the credit that he deserved. And all I done, Daniel, was I brought him in and I spoke to him. I reassured him of the confidence that we had in him. And we built his confidence up, tried to get him in the right areas, tried to get the right service to him in the final third. And eventually we managed to turn him around. And he was a fantastic player, more importantly, a fantastic goal scorer for the club.
Yeah, I think one of the key things was that early in your reign, we played Leicester away in whatever the Carling Cup, Capital One Cup, whatever it was at the time. And he got a hat-trick away at Leicester. I think it was a Monday night. There, I think we had 10 men or something like that in that game. And that striker like that, 3 goals, he's off and running then, and his confidence is going.
Well, that's down to hard work. That's down to, being prepared to make those runs. Very long, long busting runs in behind defenders. That attitude to go and get at their back 4 and cause them problem without the ball. I think it was important that was running right through our side in every position. And as I said, it was all about the team. It was all about the club. It was all about the fans. And it was all about us having a bit of pride about everything that we've done.
Yeah. What was the story with David Healy? Was that something you knew was going to happen? Because he'd scored, I think he was our top scorer the season before. So losing him must have been a massive blow to Leeds.
Listen, Heels was a fantastic lad. Don't be kidded here. He done a wonderful job for the club. And, when you look at it, sometimes, as you know, Daniel, sometimes you just can't stop players from moving on to either big clubs or perceived bigger clubs. And when the agents get involved and when the player starts to get his head turned then it becomes very difficult for clubs to hold on to players. And we know that, we accept clubs like Preston should always be, I think, developing players, producing good young players, but at the same time too, when the time is right, the club have got to then let these players go on and move on to what may be a bigger club and make sure that the financial aspect for the club is looked after and we take care of our side of the business. And I think that's what happened, Daniel, with Heels. We couldn't stop him. His head was turned. He'd been at the club. He'd done a great job. And he was moving to a fantastic club.
Yeah, he did. Healy was a great player for us. I think he was with us for like 4 years, scored a lot of goals for us. And yeah, that just got my head going. So at this point in time, there was no transfer windows. It was, a player could come and go whenever they wanted. Did you prefer it when the transfer windows came in? So you thought, right, I've got these players till January, or would you prefer that you could maybe tinker throughout the season?
Well, it's a difficult, good question, because it's got its pros and cons on both sides. And there's no doubt that I think transfer windows, particularly the second transfer window, can cause you a lot of problems. The first one we know is it allows people to go and exaggerate prices. It becomes a bit of a mess because we all know that people will leave it to the last week or whatever. So the transfer windows have their good points, but they also have their bad points because it can affect your squad and trying to build your squad early, try to get people in the door early. That can be a big problem. But back then, as you said quite rightly, Daniel, people just, when it was time, people left and you just had to adjust accordingly.
Yeah, something that came into my head last night, actually. So the current day team, we've not won away from home in about 7 or 8 months. And we won last night at Cardiff. I was sat watching the game and I thought, I feel like I've been here before. And I was looking at 20 years ago, we'd not won away from home in months and months in 2004. And we ended that away hoodoo at Cardiff at the old Millennium Park. I think Yulmar when he scored. What are your memories of that? That was a big result at the time.
Yeah, it was a big result. Obviously, a very difficult place because back then they were a good side. I'm not suggesting that they're not a good side today, but certainly back then, when you look at the team that they had and the players, they were a fantastic side. At the minute, they're going through a little bit of a tricky period, I would say, Cardiff. But no matter, it's a very tough place to go, and any kind of result at Cardiff is obviously a fantastic result. And I remember going there and getting that result was very pleasing.
Yeah, Ninian Park as well. Tough place to go. That old stadium. You've got to miss stadiums
exactly.
So in the first few months you were in, it was we'd win a couple, then lose a couple. And I remember, I don't know if this was a turning point. We lost 5-0 to Wigan. And then the week after, the derby at the time, because Blackpool weren't in our league, was Burnley. And we lost 2-0 at Burnley. After that, we'd go on to lose 1 in 19 championship games. Was that like a turning point? Did something happen after that Burnley game where it's like, right?
No, it's all about, again, I continue to say this, Daniel, it's all about management of the highs and lows of championship football. It's all about managing the good periods, but also managing the not so good periods. And what you've got to do is continue with your beliefs, continue to keep heads up, continue to keep staff focused and players focused, keep the feet on the ground and don't get too excited when you go on a good win or a good run. The same when you go on a kind of losing streak, it's going to happen. But sometimes adversity can bring out the best of you. And round about that time, getting that heavy defeat and then losing to Derby, all of a sudden you get that adversity. And that's when you see the true character of staff, of players, of fans, of board, of club. That's when you see the true character. And that's exactly what we've seen then, the true character of Preston North End.
Yeah, so after that, Cresswell would be up front. He got another hat-trick against Sunderland, I think, on New Year's Day. And then the man I want to ask you about, we bring in David Nugent. How did you come across David Nugent? 99,000, I think he came in for.
Yeah, that's right. Believe it or not, it was actually my at that time, our chief scout, Clive Middlemas, who sadly has passed away. Wonderful scout for Preston. Wonderful scout all through his career. And I remember Clive asked me to go and watch a game, Bury against, I think it was Wycombe, Daniel. And believe it or not, we're going along to watch one of my players at Forest, a guy called Nathan Tyson, play for Wycombe. And we go to the game, and I don't know why, sometimes you've got to let a player find you. Don't you go and find a player. Let that player find you. And on that night, David Nugent found me. I just felt, and I said to Clive, what do you think? And Clive said, not so sure. A lot of people have looked at this guy. A lot of people really don't want to touch him, etc. And I just had a funny feeling, Daniel. And I knew I had to follow my gut instinct. I went back and spoke to Derek Shaw and the board. I made it clear that I felt that as much as Wick Tice is a fantastic left-footed player with great pace and a great asset, I just felt that David Nugent had something special. The way that he ran at people, the ability, the confidence that he showed. And eventually we decided to take the chance and we went and bought him for £99,000.
Yeah, he was a great signing, wasn't he? I mean, it was that team, it was quite, he was like middle 20s to late 20s. And then I think he was 19 at the time. Him coming in, vibrant, full of energy. He just had a great effect on the team that year, didn't he?
Well, what he brought is he brought that energy. Not only that, character. Nugent's got fantastic character. You know, he's a real chirpy lad to be around. He's great in the training ground. You can take the PISS out of him very well, Daniel, and he does the same to you. But he was a great boy to have around the club. Very respected by his teammates, very respected by the staff. And he gave us a fantastic lift at that time.
Yeah, definitely he did. Was he a key part, do you think, to getting into the top six that season? His goals, he got quite a lot, didn't he, at the end of that season?
Yeah, I think not only that, I think he gave the rest of the team a lift. I mean, I think all the players knew we'd brought something special in here. And we've got a player that can finish, a player that can stretch teams with his pace, his direct running can cause problem. Then you throw that in to the mix with the Richard Cresswells and all the other guys that we had at that time, Daniel. It was really a special group to work with.
Yeah, definitely. I think we had Adjumang as well. He'd been brought in the November time as well. So those three. That season, I was looking through it. I didn't realise how many goalkeepers we had that season. I was looking, we had Lonergan, Chris Day, Gavin Ward, Chris Neal, I think, came on for like 20 minutes against Ipswich.
Yeah.
One of the keepers got injured. But then, was this like the final piece with Carlo Nash? It felt like a bit of a coup at the time to get Carlo Nash in. What was he like? Because he was, for me, one of the best goalkeepers I've seen at Deepdale.
Well, again, I've got to give great credit. And what I like to do in my managerial job, Daniel, was give people their place. You know, I like to give people their place, whether it's a scout, whether it's a goalkeeping coach, whether it's a first team coach or a sports scientist or a medical person. I like to give people their place so they feel that they've got something to contribute. I've got to give great credit to Pete Williams, our goalkeeping coach, a vastly experienced goalkeeping coach, because time and time again at all different clubs, this guy has continually brought in excellent goalkeepers. But certainly when he brought in Nashi, Big Nashi was a fantastic addition. Another one with great stature and personality. And it was great credit to our goalie coach, Pete, for that, if you like, advice, that opinion on the goalkeeper. We looked at many, like we always do. But for Pete to bring him in, it certainly was a special addition. And great credit to the goalkeeping coach for doing that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, at the end of that season, there were some memorable games. I remember 2-1 away at QPR on Gentry Day, 2-0 win away at Watford, where Nugent puts the bowler hat on, and a 2-1 win at Upton Park as well. Is there any memories, any matches that stand out from that time period?
I think
it was a long time ago now.
No. I think there are obviously many, but one of the things that I do remember, a very satisfying game and a very satisfying set play from the training ground away at Burnley when we flipped the ball over the top of the wall. And I've got to say that game was very memorable. It was obviously a local derby. That set piece, and we worked very hard at set pieces back then. Corners, free kicks, throw-ins, defensively, offensively. We worked very hard. But to go and make that happen, I think it was on TV at that point as well. It was such a wonderful set piece, Daniel. And it was a tremendous execution. I think it was Nuge who took the volley. Was it Nugent?
Yeah.
I think it was Greza. Greza had done the little flick over the top of the wall. I can't remember. But it was just such a special set play. Worked very well for us against a local rival on that big game. And a fantastic game to remember.
Yeah, that was actually something I wanted to ask you about, because I was watching some of the goals back, and we played Sunderland that I alluded to on New Year's Day. and it was Eddie Lewis. He flicks the ball over the wall, and Cresswell sort of scuffs the volley, not like Nugent. It goes in again, and the entire team go running over to you. And I was going to ask, that had to be something. Was that your idea at the time?
Well, it's not my idea for them to come over. It was my idea. It was my idea to try and work hard with set pieces. I knew we had an abundance of talent. Eddie Lewis with direct free kicks was a wonderful left foot, for example. We had other guys that could strike that ball very well. So I think it was just great. The players took a lot of satisfaction when corners worked and free kicks worked and throw-ins worked and things. It was just part of the team development. But certainly I would say that team in particular, out of all the teams that I've managed, that team was special when you gave them advice in relation to attacking and obviously defending. Didn't always get it right, but certainly 9 times out of 10, they were a fantastic group to work with, Daniel.
Yeah, for that to come off twice as well, it's just great. I mean, these days you'd have the Arsenal set piece coach coming out taking the credit. it wouldn't be aimed at the manager.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we'd go on a great run and we'd reach the playoffs. The playoff semis. I remember the 2-0 win against Derby at Deepdale. That was a great day. Nugent scored the opener in that game, and then the second leg at Derby. That was just a memorable night for everyone involved at Pride Park. I think this was before Derby changed it, so they only had 2,000 behind the goal. We had that entire behind the goal, and it was just a great night. What are your memories of that night? Brilliant night.
Yeah, the first game was wonderful. I remember the atmosphere at Deepdale when we played Derby in the first leg. The atmosphere was special. It was a real top atmosphere. The fans were magnificent on that day, and we played very well. And as you said, Nugent scored a great first goal. We got a little break for the second goal, but a great first leg, if you like. Although we're not that stupid and naive, we know that in the playoff, the first leg means nothing. It's always nice to get a result, of course, but the first leg means nothing. There's always a very tricky second leg, no matter what the score is. And then we go to Derby and we put in a very solid performance defensively, a great team effort. And I remember celebrating with the fans behind the goal. That was a special moment.
Yeah, I remember being behind that goal. The players were celebrating, I think, for half an hour after the game. It was just a great moment between players and fans. But that night, to go to that Derby team, they were a good team, that Derby. Raziak up front, to just shut them out was a really good achievement. They
were very special, Derby, don't be kidded. They were a team full of talent, as you said. They'd spent a lot of money as well. They were a club that were in that, if you like, top end, where they believed that they were one of the bigger clubs in the division. And they certainly did a lot of very good players, a lot of experienced players as well. But great credit to our lads. We were organised. We were very committed. We were very hard-working. And we certainly were, at that point, a first-class team to watch, not only offensively, but certainly defensively was first class.
I can imagine you didn't spend too long celebrating and that your attention was straight onto the final. I was looking at an 11-day gap between the playoff semi and a playoff final. Does that make it more difficult to prepare, or?
Well, it does, Daniel. And you're absolutely right what you said there. You celebrate. You can't just walk away and not celebrate with your supporters. Yeah. You've got to give the travelling fans, a little bit of recognition, as we always did. But we're not stupid. We know that although we've won 2-0, and we go away to Derby, and they say we know it's a very, very difficult match, and we know that the second leg, in relation to history, can throw up a lot of very strange results. So it was just such a great performance on the night, and it was a great team performance, particularly with the opposition, as you said, that we faced.
Yeah, so we head to the final. We head to Cardiff at the Millennium Stadium, and the lead up to the game, in the semi-finals that we spoke about, keeping a clean sheet against Derby in both games, Graham Alexander, who was a key player that season, he'd missed the semi-finals due to hamstring injury. Was it a really tough decision to not include him in the final? Obviously, I think Malwenny had gone to right back, Davies at centre back, so it was hard to take them out. Was that a tough decision?
Yeah, I think it's a great point. Not only that, I think there was two big decisions, two decisions that hurt me at that point. And they hurt me for if you like, personal reasons, because, as you said, Greza was such an important player. But at the same time, too, I don't believe if somebody comes in and does a very good job, as Millennium did at right back, you then look at the final and you've got that huge decision to make. Do you bring Greza back in, or do you drop a player that has already performed very well in the semi-final? And do you keep with that trust of that player? And more importantly, not to lose the respect of that player. And I'm sure now that Greza's managing, I'm sure Greza can see that decision, tough decision, like we had. The other decision that kind of hurt me a little bit was bringing Greza back onto the bench and then removing Tyrone Mears, who had been on the bench in the semi-final. That also hurt me a little bit, Daniel, because again, that wasn't really justified. I had a tough decision to make. So those two decisions, I feel, I had to give the credit to Yo Millennium. I certainly was not going to lose the respect of the team and the player because we'd got two great results and he deserved to hold on to that jersey. And then thirdly, Greza coming back from the injury, the size of the pitch away at the Millennium Stadium was very long pitch. It was another consideration with obviously Greza coming back. But I made that tough decision, Daniel. I decided to stick with Big Yule. I decided to put Greza on the bench. I was very hurt at having to remove Tyrone Mears. And that's what tough management decisions is all about, Daniel. You've got to make those choices.
Yeah, I was listening to what Alexander was saying, actually, and he was like, he said he got called into a meeting with you, and he said he was fuming. He knew what was coming before he'd even gone in. But by the time that he'd got there, listen to what he had to say. He said, I left the room and I just wanted the team to win. It didn't matter about me. I just wanted to make sure Preston North End were in the Premier League. And if that meant me being on the bench, so be it. Does that just go to speak about the togetherness of that group? Because you wouldn't often get that.
Well, you've got to understand that, of course, it doesn't matter what player it is, including you and I. If we're dropped, then we're not going to be happy. So you understand there has to be that pride and disappointment of not being played. But at the same time, too, particularly when you leave the playing side, and now that Greza's in the management side, and he will come across very similar situations where he's got to look at certain events that take place, certain times of the season, certain instructions that you're getting from your medical department. You look at players, you look at the players that had already been in the team, and you want to be fair. I always believe that you've got to try and be fair and equal to every single player, no matter their age, no matter their stature, or their international experience or whatever. I always tried to be fair and equal. And I felt at that time that was a fair decision to make. And I certainly, as I said, those two choices were tough, particularly leaving Tyrone out of that squad and then, of course, putting Greza on the bench. But I'm sure today, Greza would fully understand it was all about the best interest of the team. And it was all about trying to win that match with people that I felt had got us there.
Yeah, we beat West Ham twice that season. A lot of people, we beat them twice, we should have gone and won. But I think what a lot of people forget is the season before, West Ham had actually lost at Cardiff to Crystal Palace. And that can just be fuel for a team. You know, they felt the feeling of losing, and it can just be a little bit more not more motivation, but a big factor going in. Because it's rare you'd see a team lose 2 playoff finals in a row. Were you confident going into that game? You must have been.
Oh, absolutely. But this team confident to go anywhere. But we also knew that it was a long, hard season. That 11-day break was a major concern. I've got to tell you, a major concern. And you go to Cardiff, this big pitch, and what the disappointing thing was, if you remember the goal, and I can't remember if it was Matthew Etherington had been down the left-hand side and put that ball into the box. Big Claude Davies was running back and he slipped. The ball went behind him. And then I think it was Bobby Zamora that put the ball into the back of the net. So we lost a goal, I feel, because the player had slipped inside the box, which was unfortunate. On the day, we didn't just play with the same intensity as we did. It was at the end of a long, hard season. The playoff and the playoff finals can throw up, anything can happen in these games. Need that little bit of luck on the day, that break. And unfortunately, on the day, our players, the ones that could play the 8s and 9s out of 10 performances, just didn't reach their maximum potential. But at the same time, too, our budget was just over 5 million. Their budget was over 35, 36 million. This was a huge club. And we found ourselves in that last game just missing out because of what I feel was a slip inside the 18-yard box by our defending player.
Yeah, it's small margins, isn't it? I mean, the game, it was a really, really tight game. There was nothing in the game at all, was there? It was just
That's
one
right.
moment, and that can affect the rest. Is there any memories from that day that spring to mind? Any stories from that day?
I just remember the sadness at the end of looking at all the Preston fans all the way around the stadium with the flags and the scarves and all the bits and pieces. And I remember that was a real sore one to take because we really wanted to do it for you. We wanted to get you to the Premier League. We wanted that club to go where it belongs, which is in the Premier League. And unfortunately, on the day, as you said, Daniel, small margins, sometimes lady luck's on your side, sometimes things happen. And unfortunately, it just wasn't to be. Very disappointing.
Yeah, I've heard you speak about your Derby team that you got promoted to the Premier League and that it was a couple of seasons too soon. The plan was season 3, I think it was said, and they went up straight away. Do you think the team that we had in 2005, 2006, do you think that would have been more ready equipped for the Premier League? Had we? I know it's happened since now, but would that have been more equipped if we'd have got there than that Derby team, do you think?
Yeah, I think it probably would have been, to be honest with you. Although you never can tell, the Premier League's a very difficult place. There's no doubt when you go in there, you need commitment and support from the top, and you've got to get in there. And this is an area where you've got to spend money to compete. The Preston side was, of course, a lot of very special players, experienced players, and I've got no doubt they would have been in and handled themselves very well. But even on top of that, Daniel, there was still additions required if that happened, and we had to obviously bring in some quality players to add to the quality squad that we already had at Preston. But it was a disappointment, unfortunately.
Yeah. Now, the following season, we didn't really suffer, they call it a playoff hangover. What goes into getting a team ready after you've lost 3 weeks of your summer, basically, for the game? What goes into getting a team ready? Because we started that season really well the following season.
Well, again, you've got that short period, haven't you, over the summer of preparation. You've got to adjust your pre-season training and in relation to additions as well. Then there's a short window because of when the playoff final was. So there's a big concern building into the new season. But again, wonderful scouting department, brought in some really good players. We lost some very important players. As you know. And again, it was all about trying to get those demands on the training ground, trying to hit the ground running and trying to pick up from where we left. I think that was very, very important.
Yeah, you spoke about then losing some big players. I mean, Richard Cresswell, 21 goals the season before. Eddie Lewis, probably the best left winger in the league the season before. How big of a blow was that, losing those two? Yeah,
don't forget, I'm sure we'll talk about it, but we eventually meet Leeds United in the semi-finals. And of course, the three players that leave, Cressy, David Healy and Eddie Lewis, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Daniel, I think they're all involved in the squad at Leeds United at that point.
They were.
So they were very important players for us, but at the same time too, as I said at the start, sometimes you just can't stop players from moving on. And we lost some very, very important players, but we also brought in some very good talented players, which was important.
Yeah, we did. I think Danny Dicchio was brought in that summer. He was actually the only cash transfer I was looking through. That was the only cash transfer spent that summer. David Jones on loan from Man United. He was really good that season, wasn't he? Was there any other players you can think of that you wanted to bring in that didn't get over the line? Stephen Pearson that you managed at Motherwell. He was always spoken about. I've heard Jamie Curitan, Robbie Blake. Any of those true? Or
yeah, I think there's a whole range of people at that point. Daniel, you're sitting down with obviously the scouting department and our chief scout, who was very switched on with all the players. We'd obviously been watching a lot of games and a lot of players with the staff. And again, we understand that we've got a certain level of what we can go to for bringing players in. So there was a whole range of people, north and south of the border, one or two guys from abroad as well. And we did, as I said, Daniel, I'd be here all day trying to tell you what the list was, but there certainly was a lot on the list. And we just tried to do the best we could to bring in the right players.
Do any names spring to mind? Any on
that list?
I'm not going to.
I'm not going to I'm not going to give you some mouth-watering names. No, I'm not going to tell you that I did meet Lionel Messi down at the Preston area. I had a long chat with him and Ronaldo. Unfortunately, I couldn't convince him to come to Preston, and unfortunately, they moved on to bigger and better things and managed to keep their careers going in a good direction, Daniel.
I'm not sure if they'd have got in ahead of Nugent anyway. But yeah, speaking of Nugent, so we start that season, and for me, one of the best North End away wins I can remember is going to Ipswich on Bank Holiday Monday. Ipswich had finished third the season before, just missed out on automatic, and we went there and we wiped the floor with them. What are your memories of that day? Nugent was unplayable that day.
Unplayable, and again, you're talking about a very good Ipswich Town team. If you remember, they played some wonderful football. They had a very good squad of players, a great balance to their team, excellent management, experienced management team in place as well. And we went there and we played some wonderful stuff, as you said. But on that day, the David Nugent was just unstoppable, and that's what he could do to teams. He could rip teams apart on his own, and that's what he did.
Yeah, definitely. I think he got injured, Nugent, for a few weeks after that. We was without him. We went on a bit of a sticky run, got beat 3-0 midweek away to Luton. But then we'd go from September to February without losing, which in the Championship, everyone says the toughest league, and it takes some doing that, doesn't it? It's go unbeaten for that long. How good was that team that second season?
Well, again, it's all down to the training ground, isn't it? It's all down to the disciplines. It's all down to the character and the pride in defending and the pride in attacking. And, you know, it's all about the demands. And that's what we try to do again. We try to put those demands on these players. Again, pulling on that Preston jersey. This is a proud day. Don't forget it. This is a special moment. And it's all about defenders having the pride to defend. It's all about attackers and midfield players and wide players getting focused on scoring goals and creating chances. And again, you know, big responsibility on what their position. And I think that was important, Daniel. I think it was important that we had that expectation from the very back to the very front.
Yeah, definitely. A player, I think, who was key that season. You don't really get spoken about that much, but I really wanted to ask you about him. Brian O'Neill. How good was Brian O'Neill in that midfield?
Not just Brian O'Neill. They're a little genius called Paul McKenna. These two guys were absolutely fantastic. And, you know, we brought in some great players after that. Jarrett came in. Adam Nolan came in. Some important players came in just after that. But young Stocky came in as well. Brian Stock. But certainly with these two guys, Brian O'Neill and McKenna, two vastly experienced players, two first-class leaders, excellent organisers of players around them, great vision, great ability to pass the ball, and players that had a lot about them, on and off the pitch. And they were very important to us, but both wonderful players for the club.
Yeah, I think it took us 10 years to replace Brian O'Neill. We was waiting for a player like that. Speaking of signings, I just want to speak about Simon Whaley. How did the signing of Simon Whaley come about? Because that seemed again, I think it was Bury again, wasn't it?
Well, again, Clive Middlemass has got to take the credit. This guy was fantastic on recognising and identifying players. And I think it was Clive that first of all brought his name up. Then what happens after that, Daniel, is the staff start to go and watch him in games. Myself and the staff will go and watch him in games and look at what he does, home and away, etc. And in the end, it's a group decision. We decide as a group that that's where we're going to go. We put it to the chairman, Derek Shaw, on the board. And then we eventually bring this player in who was another one that had great energy, very direct, good goal scorer, and can cause opposition a lot of problems. It was an excellent addition for the team. And again, great credit to Clive for identifying that.
Yeah, how much potential do you think Simon Whaley had? Because his career had just sort of like go out, really. He had a few years and then he just sort of disappeared. Could you think he could have played at that top level? Because he was linked with Everton the summer after you'd left. Do you think he had the potential to play that high?
Yeah, I think he certainly had the ability, and he could score goals. And at that point, it's just all about getting breaks in life, finding yourself at the right place at the right time, getting yourself into the right environment that can build you confidence, having people around you that are confident on who you are and what you can bring. And sometimes a little bit of luck plays a part as well, Daniel. But there's no doubt that this lad, as a young lad, had great potential. He certainly could get at defenders, and he can put in great crosses and score great goals, etc. And as you said, maybe it was a little bit of bad luck or a little bit of misguidance or whatever. Sometimes that can just happen in life, but he was a wonderful player for us.
Yeah, we get to the Christmas period. I don't know if you remember this. We played Plymouth away. It was just after Boxing Day. We got to Bristol. I think the players were already there. Game gets postponed. What's the feeling like that? You've gone all the way to Plymouth just after Christmas and it gets postponed.
I remember it. I remember it, Daniel. I remember it well. And obviously you're prepared all week. It's not a travel round the corner, as we know. It's a long way away. And it's just a disaster. But as I said before, these things you prepare for. You're always preparing for these difficult winter months of what can throw up anything. And you've just got to swallow the pill, Daniel. Get back on that team coach and head back on the road again.
I remember being at Bristol Services when we got the news, and I was like, "You've got to be joking!" But a couple of days later, we actually had to go to Norwich away. And that day, we went to Norwich, destroyed them 3-0. Tough place to go, Carrow Road as well. But key point in the season was then because he was doing really well. Adam Nolan got his leg broke. That was a big blow, that wasn't it? Yeah, big blow that.
Dixon it too. And Big Dixon's not that type of player. He's not a nasty player. He's not that type of character. It was a very unfortunate incident. But as you said, at that point, Adam Nolan was on top form. Mm-hmm. And he was a great creator of chances, a great goal-scoring midfield player. Loved to get himself into little pockets. Had a very good eye for a final pass. And he certainly knew how to play in that final third. So it was a devastating blow for us to lose such an important player. And I was gutted for Big Dixon because Big Dixon's certainly not that type of character, and certainly not that type of lad that you would expect would go out and do that intentionally, and it was unfortunate.
Yeah, so eventually the unbeaten run comes to end at Reading. And if people remember, that was that Reading team. I think they got like 107 points that season. And we gave them a real good game at the Medeski. But the run coming to end, I think that was a big blowing if we could have kept that going. So we didn't finish too far. I think about 8-9 points from the top two. Just a couple too many draws, maybe. But do you think we could have challenged for that second place? If Reading, obviously, that's a freak season, Reading getting that many points.
Yeah, again, I can't quite remember about injuries and suspensions and what took place in a lot of these matches. But as you know, we were certainly in and around it. There's no doubt that the Reading away, again, they were a club that was flying high. Very, very good front players, if I remember right. Kind of wide in front. Players were very, very potent, had a lot of pace about them, could score goals, and it was unfortunate. And unfortunately, the saddest part of all is that my management team have been told that as long as Peter is the chairman, then there will never be a chance of me returning to Preston North End as manager.
Every time for the last 10 or 12 years, a manager leaves his post. I see it, you see it on social media. Bring the king back, is Billy coming back? Got to ask you, has it ever been close? We've lost to Leeds, the third season. Are you thinking, right, we can have a proper go at it the third season? We've got a great team. Or did you know that he was gonna end up leaving? 4 weeks later, you would be the manager at Derby. What actually happened with that?
What actually happened was this. After the playoff against Leeds, I met Derek Shaw in the Swallow Hotel in Preston.